Too bad Coke wasn't our sponsor, because we can have like a...
Yeah, too bad Coke wasn't our sponsor when you're drinking Pepsi.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt.
And I'm Mr. Nutter Butters.
And we're the co-hosts of Powered by Rainbows.
And this is our podcast, On the Mic with Matt and Mike.
So welcome to the show.
Welcome everyone to Powered by Rainbows and our podcast, Mike and Matt and Mr. Nutter Butters. Today is our first episode of the new podcast format. We're hoping it works, so let us know in the comments down below and give us a like. But today we're going to be talking about our worst dates experiences. So, Mike, would you like to start us off or talk about what we're going to talk about?
Oh wow, you're really jumping into that, aren't you?
Well, how do you want to begin this whole thing? I mean,
I don't know. Like you could kind of segue into it a little bit.
All right,
it's like,
well, give us a segue.
Have you ever had a really bad date? Because we sure have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so my first, I actually have a couple of really, really bad ones.
Okay.
All right. So the first one was...
For the record, we know a lot of these stories already.
Yeah, we know a lot of each other's stories.
And our conversations in the past is why we decided to create a podcast. So...
Yeah.
What's your story?
Okay, so this was a couple of years ago, back in 2020. So I ended up talking to this guy. I was using a dating site called Match.com. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, they're not going to be a sponsor.
Yeah,
maybe.
they're not a sponsor, so...
They're not a current sponsor.
Yeah, they're not a current sponsor.
If they want to, we're going to change our story. No.
So...
We'll be like, all of a sudden, you'll see bleeps in the middle of the episode.
I mean, as far as online dating went, I would say that honestly, Match was probably one of the best in terms of like, in terms of quality. I mean, when you get to like the free apps, that's when you tend to get into some trouble. But people that actually pay to be there, they're generally a little more decent. But anyway, so 2020.
2019, you said.
2020.
Okay.
It was right after COVID and everything. COVID had started, and anyway, so I ended up because there were no restaurants or anything open. We had to meet at a state park. Now this guy lived in New York, and I traveled there for about 3 hours to meet him. He was super nice. We talked for a couple of days prior. So anyway, I get there, and he had neglected to tell me that apparently they charge admission at state parks in New York, and I didn't know that. They only charged cash, so I had to like reach into my my side compartment, and I had to come up with like about $5 worth of change.
Okay, but like, in all fairness, that's something where if he knew that there was a price for admission, he should have covered that cost for you on your way in.
I would have just been happy to know about it, so I could have stopped at an ATM beforehand, because it took me a couple of minutes to find the change.
Who doesn't have $5 on them? Like in cash.
I didn't carry cash. I still don't.
Oh yeah.
So.
Anyway, so you're at the park, you're looking for change.
So at any rate, I can't really blame him for that. So whatever. He could have warned me, but he didn't. So whatever. I'm not too upset about
his
that.
fault, but not entirely not his fault either.
Yeah. So anyway, I get there, and at first he seems like a really nice guy and everything, and we were joking around, we were having fun, we had a little cookout and everything, and then
he cooked for you.
Well, we had a cookout. It was like he did the grilling.
Oh, okay.
It was just I brought the food. He did the grilling.
Nice.
It was nice. Yeah. One thing I will say about New York's their state parks is because they charge an admission price, the amenities that they offer are really, really good. Like the benches are really nice. The bathrooms are absolutely immaculate. Like they actually pay somebody to go in there and clean them every few hours.
So they have the money to do nice things with it.
Yeah, it's not entirely taxpayer funded. So like you come there and you pay a price and they kind of do things. So anyway, I start to notice like, just small things after a while. He begins referring to his dog as the thing. Which, fine. I mean, maybe he had some sort of like, it was weird. Maybe he had some sort of, little pet name for his pet. I don't know. But it's just he was kind of mean about the whole thing. And anyway, so we continue the date and everything, and as time goes on, he makes a comment to me. Now, again, because we're going to a state park, I didn't know what the state park was going to look like. It turned out it was actually just like on the beach of like a large lake. And it wasn't that big, it wasn't that rugged or anything, it was just outdoors and it was on the beach. I was expecting more outdoorsy because I'd never been there, so I wasn't really dressed all that well. I was, I had jeans and a t-shirt, not, because again, you're going to an outdoor date, you don't expect, anyway.
Yeah.
So he says to me, he goes, after a while, he goes, your appearance is passable. He goes, I think I can work on you. Work on me, as if I needed his help.
Okay.
So, yeah. I was a little annoyed by that one. But again, I let it slide. I figured, okay, everybody's entitled to make, a couple of bad mistakes here and there. And then...
I mean, that's a pretty bad one on a first meet.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bad one on, like, a year-in kind of, like, date.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Yeah. So, anyway, we continue the date and everything, and it turns out okay, but, towards the end of the day, it started to rain, and it absolutely poured, and, like, so I only had, like, a really small car, and he had, like a hatchback, a thing that opened up in the back. So we sat in the back of his truck for a while. And just...
There's sign number one. He had a truck.
Well... We've noticed some things about truck owners. So
Pickup trucks only.
Pickup trucks, yeah. So anyway, so we just, we keep talking and stuff, and I noticed that he has a lot of really negative things to say about people who are less fortunate than him. And, again, I kind of let it slide.
Pretty rich.
He wasn't real. He wasn't rich. He just thought he was.
Oh, okay.
It was the kind of thing, like, later on, he admitted to me that he's, like, drowning in student loan debt, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. And his first question to me was, how much do you make? So I was a little taken aback by that one, because I've never really had anybody ask me that on a first date before. It's a weird question to ask somebody.
So you've gotten that question too. Okay. Okay, sorry.
I have gotten that question.
It's a weird question for a first date.
For a first date, I mean, I could understand if maybe it's like, a couple of dates in, maybe then you want to know, but it's not a good first date question. So, I think I gave him some sort of like non-committal answer, something like, I make enough to survive, things like that.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, good, because I have a couple $100,000 in student loan debt, and he's like, I don't really make all that much. So I was a little shocked by that one. Didn't really anticipate that I would be taking on his student loan debt if we started dating, but apparently that was on his mind. So later on, a couple of days passes, and there's a bar that I used to like to go to, and we weren't able to go there during COVID because there was a huge lockdown in like March, I think, and this was like maybe July. They just lifted the lockdown. Our numbers were down considerably. So anyway, they allowed us to go to the bar again, and I went to the bar. And I told him that I was excited to see a lot of my friends and stuff. And anyway, he goes, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And then later on, we had like a date to meet a couple of days later. And he just said to me, I'm not comfortable with meeting you after you've been to the bar. And I said to him, well, you could have told me that before I actually went to the bar. Yeah. Why not communicate a little bit? And he goes, well, I didn't think that I should have to tell you how to live. He goes, I just think you should know how to know how to treat other people.
So, like, he wasn't at all okay with you going to any bar?
Apparently not. I think it had something to do with COVID, but
Oh, okay.
I mean, at the same time, he was also meeting people off of Match.
Yeah, so he was doing just as bad a thing.
He was, yeah.
If that's your argument.
That was my argument. I mean, he was going out and he was doing things, and it wasn't like,
So he's a hypocrite.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on site every day, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like I was immune to risk or like, And he knew that I worked on site all the time before we even met, so he was okay with it until then. But once it became a bar, then it was like, So,
That's pretty bad.
yeah, that was pretty bad. So I haven't talked to him since. And he told me that he was apparently on Match for 8 years. I believe he said he's been paying for a subscription. And
Yeah, good luck finding somebody. out
yeah, I'm shocked he's been on there for 8 years.
there. See, I know him enough to be. I know that he's being sarcastic. So yeah, that's pretty terrible. So what lessons do you think you can learn from that of like relationship like going forward? What's the main takeaway from that?
The main takeaway from that, for me, was that when you start getting warning signs in the beginning, it's probably a good idea to back out then. As soon as he made that comment about my appearance, how it's salvageable, I should have just been like, I'm done.
No, that's
I should have walked away right at that point.
yeah. So you want to hear mine?
Sure.
Okay, so it's like randomly middle of summer, and I start talking to this guy on Grindr, which was like my app of choice. And you get a lot of people who are like very much just into hookups that are trying to, get one certain thing. And I was on there trying to find dates in a long-term relationship. Not the best place to find it, but it is, where I eventually met Michael. So, it's not that terrible of a place to find someone if you look at it that way. But I mean, so I was on this app, and a bunch of guys were like messaging and saying how, hey, yeah, sure, I'm into dating. And then all of a sudden, like, they don't want to meet you like tomorrow or something. They only want to meet you tonight. And I'm like, okay, so you're lying completely. Anyway, start talking to this guy. We go out on like a Tuesday, I think it was. And probably it's like the worst date I've been on in my entire life. But we meet up in like the parking lot of this mall. And we end up, I think we first went to like lunch or dinner or whatever you call it. And he starts saying how there's a bunch of like older people in this restaurant. And I'm like, well, so... And then we would go for this long drive around the entire town, and then we went bowling, and and then we end up like kissing in the parking lot of this mall, and I mean, a year and a half later, here we are. Yeah, probably the worst date I've been on. Yeah.
That guy sounds like a real asshole.
Yeah, he was, and he still is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost seems like the bowling alley that you went to and the restaurant you went to probably went out of business after that.
It is funny because we did stop through that town a while ago,
Yeah.
and the restaurant, the bowling alley, another restaurant we went into in town, and I believe the KFC that we went to on like a third or fourth date is also closed down. I checked into that.
Yeah.
So that's closed as well. It's almost like we had very bad luck for that city.
I think we drained their luck.
By the way, the entire date I was talking about was with Michael.
Yeah.
But no. So real story. You want a real story?
I want a real story.
Okay. So we. It's hard to pick. I've had a lot of bad ones. Okay. So weirdly same mall that you and I started going out in. I go to this mall with this guy named Matthew, and he literally.
It's the name.
He uses like the longer form, and he's like, I don't like being called Matt. I only like Matthew. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird, but it kind of works out for us because, if we do start dating, at least when you call each other, it can be like, okay, so hi Matt or hi Matthew, I get it. So, again, we're meeting on Grindr. Not the best place, but okay, whatever. And we end up like going to this mall meeting, and immediately I start noticing that it's a little bit different than the normal date. And this guy just keeps talking no matter what. And we like go store to store to store, not really buying anything, first dates aren't really about that. And I always try to like make a first date where it's not like a movie where you're not able to talk to each other and learn about the other person, because that's a bad date, because you don't really learn about the other person. You just go together to something, where if you're like going to a mall or go mini golfing or something else, some sort of activity, you can talk, you can get to know each other, see if you're a good fit. This guy kept talking about himself, and he's like, keep talking about his family not accepting him a little bit for being gay. Other family members did, and I'm like, I have no idea who these people are, but he's going off on a list of, well, Aunt this and Aunt Susie supports me, Sharon doesn't support me, and I'm like, who are these people? I don't know them. I've never been to a family reunion of yours. Like, I have no clue, but thanks for telling me in advance of these people. And I would like start interjecting myself into this talk. And he would like say something, and I'd be like, oh, okay, so I have a similar story. And I would start telling my story just so that I can let him know who I am, and so we can get to know each other a little more, so he can, by the end of the date, so he can know me. Well, I'm like a quarter way into my story, and I'm like, oh, like literally a couple sentences in, and he starts interrupting, and he's like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this other part about my story. And literally you can tell the entire time he was not paying attention to anything I said. It was just whatever he wanted to say next. And it went on for a good 3 hours this way. And I'm like trying to come up with a way to get out of this whole date, and that shouldn't be how you go through a date. I think if you have that moment where you're like, I want to get out of this, not a great example of your relationship. And then I remember at the very end, he was like, well, oh, I'm sorry I talk so much. I was really nervous. I'm like, if you're nervous, you stay quiet. You ask questions from your other person and let them talk more and let them carry on the conversation mostly. If you're nervous, that's what you do, not overpower someone and not really listen to them. I'm like, I've learned a lot about you. And he's like, yeah, there's a lot to tell. And I'm like, obviously, like this is like 5 dates worth of stuff crammed into one. And so he's like, I promise on like the second date, I'll be better. And I'm like, sure, so then he's like, does this mean I get to kiss you now? And I'm like, wait, well, like what progression were we talking about? Like you went right from talking about yourself to I'm gonna kiss you, and this is the end goal of the date. And then he's like, I mean, if you want, you can come back to so-and-so town that he lived in, which was a college town. And I'm like, okay, no, thank you. I'm gonna go back home now. You're going to go back home now. That's the way this is going to work. And I shall see, tomorrow how I feel. Well, tomorrow came, and he starts, like, literally through the night texting me through, I believe it was Messenger on Facebook at the time. And because we were trying to get to that platform so that way we can, like, FaceTime each other eventually. Sort of like you and I did right away. But day 2, he starts like texting me line by line other stories about his life. And I'm like, so this isn't you being nervous anymore. This is just you being like very talkative and thinking your stories are the only ones that are important. So I just like say to him, hey, you got to calm down or else I'm going to, leave, And he's just like, oh, I'm sorry. I just thought that you wanted to know about my life. I guess I was wrong. And I'm like, apparently you were. Goodbye, And that was that. But I've literally gone out with Matthew. It was very weird.
I would just like to point out that you did something similar to me with the family members right before Thanksgiving. Okay, so right before Thanksgiving, he decides that he is going to give me a list of family members and how they're related to each other. Like, he was like, okay, and this one is the mother of this one, and then this one is the great aunt of this one, and then this one is second cousins to this one, and 99% of these people I do not know.
Well, I was trying to prepare you because we were going to go to a family event, and I knew these people were going to be there. And I'm like, I don't want you going in blind. And especially with certain people in the family, it was like, you should probably know about certain things in advance not to bring up around them, you know? And so I tried to prepare you, but then I never, explained. I explained way too much in detail, I think. And it wasn't just, hey, when you meet these certain people, these are the warnings. That's it.
It was about 2 hours of a conversation when I was trying to sleep the night before we had to get up.
But to be fair, before we went to Pittsburgh on vacation, we were driving to Pittsburgh, and he kept me up all night. Because he's like, I can sleep in the car on the ride there. And I'm like, I can't because I have to drive the entire way. And then once you get to Pittsburgh, if you know Pittsburgh at all, they have fucking 700 bridges. So
They do.
it's not the easiest driving in the world because there's bridges on top of bridges on top of bridges, literally. And so GPS is go this way, and why are you going that way? Why did this? I'm like, there's a bridge on top of me. Is that the one you wanted me on? And Siri's just apparently go that way. It was horrible. Anyway, driving in Pittsburgh was horrible.
I didn't think it was that bad.
No, because you were the passenger. And you're just putting in the address in. That was the extent to how you worked.
And taking pictures.
Yeah, and taking pictures.
Yeah.
It was a nice trip. But
It was a nice trip. I really enjoyed it.
So, give me another story. What else happened to you in your life?
Okay, I have so many. My match, my year on Match was eventful. I did have a few nice dates, but I had some bad ones. Let's see.
Is there any bad ones from Grindr, or is it just Match was bad?
Believe it or not, it was Match. It
Oh,
was
really?
Grindr. I think the problem was with Grindr. I kind of expected that I was going to be dealing with the problem people of the area. So I just kind of prepared myself. But the problem was
So the bar was lower on Grindr.
the bar was a lot lower on Grindr, but on Match I think I kind of expected a little better from the people. So
I just can't believe you paid for it.
I did. I was an idiot. Yeah.
Well, no, I paid for literally when I first came out, I paid for Match, and
Oh, it's expensive.
it is expensive. Well, see, I tried to trick Match, so what I did.
Good luck with that.
I think they were prepared for me because I saw this guy in this college town on there day 1 after I came out to my family. I signed up for all these dating apps, and then day 1 I saw this guy on here, and I'm like, oh, he's really cute. So I knew I couldn't message unless I had the paid version. So I signed up for the paid version. I messaged him, and I'm like, hey, by the way, you're really cute, but I'm losing my membership really, really soon, And so if you want, I would really love to talk to you. Here's my phone number, And then quite literally, right after I sent that message, I called my bank, and I'm like, oh, that's a fraudulent charge. And I just canceled it.
Wow.
So I'm like, I was on Match for I think about an hour and a half in total. Yeah.
Match
The guy
isn't
never
bad.
messaged me.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
Yeah.
But
So, okay, let's see.
that's story number 2.
Story number 2. Okay, this was probably my second worst date. I ended up meeting this guy in New Jersey. We went to this. We were going to a mall. It was.
Oh my god, is this your ex or is this?
No, this is a different guy from New
Okay.
Jersey. Okay,
You went
so
all over for dates.
I really did.
I only went Pennsylvania,
Yeah, see, I was expanding my area because I knew that in this area, my father had kind of ruined a lot of this area for me, so I was just
That's
kind
another
of.
episode.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. My father's gay. I guess I just kind of ruined that episode, didn't I? Anyway,
Not really.
so I had to go out of the area. Now, I know everybody's probably thinking that, I'm a lunatic for doing all of this. I'm not. I had reasons. So I ended up going to meet this guy in New Jersey, and we met at a mall and everything, and he seemed nice, and again, he was fantastic. So we stopped at this bookstore. It was like 2 stories. I've never seen a bookstore that big.
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, we're
a
just
cool first date place to meet it, by the way.
yeah.
Because then you can like go around and be like, what kind of books do you like, and what are you interested in? Like that is actually not a bad. I like that.
Yeah. It was pretty good.
Who came up with that? You or
That was him. We agreed to meet at the mall, but
okay.
so anyway, he tells me that he's into photography and stuff, and you would have liked him.
You have a type.
Not really. I just tend to find photographers. I think they just have a hard time finding dates.
Wow. Okay, shots fired at the photography company. Okay. I can't think. No. Please continue of how horrible photographers are.
No, okay.
Did he promise to take you on a photo shoot?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't creepy like that? Okay.
Well, just wait. So
Did I spoil the ending?
Yeah, a little bit. So, all he's doing is just looking at these photography books, and I'm not really all that interested in photography, but I'm willing to, to listen to people and talk so that they could talk about their interests. Mm-hmm. But after about a good 45 minutes, he's still talking about photography, and I don't know what the hell he's going on about. So I eventually just excused myself so I could go look at some other stuff. And, we met back, and he's like, hey, do you want to go somewhere to eat? So I was like, okay, where do you recommend? Because, obviously...
This is your town.
This is your town. You should know where to go. Mm-hmm. He's like, I don't really know. He's like, where do you want to go?
Oh, my God. This is your town. You should at least have a couple in mind.
Have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Just...
Or at least ask what genre.
Exactly. Just... Ask what I'm hungry for, and then you could decide from that off of that. Mm-hmm. Nothing. So I was like, all right. So I pulled out my phone. I typed in restaurants near me, and then we ended up going to this place out in the middle of nowhere. I have no idea. Or as close to the middle of nowhere as you can get in New Jersey. It was near a beach and stuff. It was like...
That kind of describes the whole state.
Oh, no, you have no idea.
So how long is this away from the bookstore?
It was a good 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, not terrible.
Well,
but not...
We agreed to go in his car, to the restaurant, and then he'd drive me back. I should have never agreed to that, because you'll find out why. So... We get there and everything, and we're having our lunch at the time, and he keeps ordering like more and more food, and I'm like, wow, he's really, really hungry. And just wait. Eventually, he tells me, yeah, he's like, I used to be a teacher's assistant, but I got fired because a student made up lies about me.
Okay.
And I was like, what kind of lies? And he goes, he basically said that I was hitting on him. And I was like, well, how old was this student? And he goes, about 16. So, okay.
How old is this guy?
This guy was like in his 30s.
Yeah, no. Not good optics.
Like 30, maybe like lower 30s, but still way too damn old to be, messing around with teenagers. Mm-hmm. So, at that point, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm not really into all this,
I will give him credit. At least he was upfront about that one.
He was upfront about it because I would have found out about it anyway.
Yeah.
But, he, at any rate, so...
Yeah. It's not good.
No.
But it's better that he was upfront about it.
Yeah.
So.
Now, okay, so then, right as, we're all getting done with our food and everything, again, I'd like to point out, he ordered, like, appetizers. He ordered himself, like, an alcoholic drink. He ordered, like, probably one of the most expensive things on the menu. He decides that he's going to go to the bathroom right as the bill comes. He was in the bathroom for about a good 40 minutes, long enough so that I would have had to pay the bill. I was going to do that anyway, but
Why? Though? You came to his town.
Yeah. I did not like the fact that he kind of just went to the bathroom and made me pay the bill. That really kind of infuriated me.
What makes me angry is, like, you drove hours to get there.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of understood if you're the one driving to their town, they pay.
I wouldn't have even asked him to pay. Like I said, I was willing to pay, but I just didn't like how it was done. Like, it was forced on me. That just really pissed me off.
Yeah.
And when you combine that with the with the other stuff about the kid,
Yeah.
And I mean, I see him now. Like, I followed his photography company on Instagram, and the models that he gets to model for him.
So it's not just like a landscape photography kind of like, let's just shoot buildings.
He likes buildings and other stuff, but he also likes that type of photography as well. And the models that he gets, let's just say, are closer to their 18th birthday than they are to their 19th. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I am certainly not saying that he did anything wrong, but when you combine those two things, it does not look
when
good
you're
at all.
accused and then you're also doing certain moves.
Yeah, when you're accused of something like that, you should not be getting models that are that young.
Like, the moment you're accused of that, I would, like, take myself out of any situation where I could be accused of.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was,
That was bad.
yeah. Didn't enjoy that date.
No.
Then I had to drive home, and yeah.
Okay. So, we've learned not to get in the car with your date on a first date and drive somewhere, even though that's exactly what we did. Don't listen to us. No, I'm kidding. Okay, great example here. I went on this date. He knows about this. This is the guy you wanted to go see in the grocery store for some weird, strange reason.
I want to see how big of a weirdo this guy is.
We're like driving through this town, and I'm like, hey, do I got a story for you from this town, you know? So I drove, what was it, like 40 minutes or 45 minutes?
It was a good distance.
Yeah. So I meet this guy on Grindr, and he's cute. He's into pup play, and I'm like, okay, so I'm a pup too. Like, let's meet up. You know, like, we kind of hit it off on Grindr. Why not, you know? Now, by this point in my dating experience, I have a list of red flags, because I've learned over the years that if a guy doesn't answer correctly to these things, I probably shouldn't go out with him. Now, I'm not saying this is everyone's list, and it should be everyone's list. I'm just saying, for me, this was my list, you know, of you needed to have a car, you need to have a license, you need to have a job. Like, you have a stable life on your own, so that way, when I come into this life, I'm not required to bring stability to it, you know?
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying these should be requirements of anyone else. I'm just saying these were my personal ones. Anyway,
I think it's a reasonable requirement.
well, if you live in a city, you don't need a car or license.
Well, no, but I mean,
You know.
like, it is a good idea for the person that you're dating to, at the very least, have a job.
Yeah.
You know, because otherwise you're gonna be playing their mommy and daddy, and you don't want to do that.
Well, this guy had a job, and he's like, I work in a grocery store. And I'm like, okay, that's commendable. Like, well, what's your dream after that? And he's like, well, I don't really have a dream yet. I'm trying to figure that out. Okay, fair enough, you know? Like, you can be questioning things and wondering what to do next. That's fine. So, he's like, I don't have a car, I don't have a license. I'm like, well, that makes things difficult, but still, you're cute, and, we have a lot in common, so let's meet up. And so he goes, well, because I don't have a car, how about we meet up in my town? And I'm like, okay, so that's a 45-minute drive for me. Fine, I'll make the trip, So I go all the way out there, and I go, we sort of say that we're going to meet up at the pool in this, like, town park that's there. And I'm running like 25 minutes late. And so I message him, like, before I leave my house. I'm like, hey, by the way, I'm running really late today. Like, my stomach wasn't good. Sorry. So just know I'm going to be like 25 minutes late getting there. He answers, no problem. just let me know when you're like 5 minutes away or something. No problem. Okay, so we get there. I get in the parking lot of this like pool that's closed down because it was getting repairs or something. I don't know. But anyway, I get there and there's like people walking by. I'm just sitting there in the middle of a parking lot, middle of daylight, because I refuse to meet anyone at nighttime. I refuse to meet anyone without street lights around, So that way it's safe, But he comes, it was like 20 minutes later. And I'm like, so, where do you live? And he's like, because when we were talking, he's like, I only live like 2 blocks away from where we were meeting at. So he could easily walk. And I'm like, hey, I told you I'm going to be 20 minutes late. And it took me 45 minutes to get there. You should be there when I arrive. Or like right around the corner, And I'm like, I waited like another 20 minutes for you. Like, wow, But he comes around the corner literally with this like pup play t-shirt on. Like what are they called? T-shirt, but no sleeves. Tank top. Sorry. Words are hard. So, pup play tank top with like a giant pup on the front, and then with the tail from a pup play. Now, if you're not aware, in pup play community, there's like tails that you can wear on your belt that you wear to certain pup events and pride events and stuff like that to show off, like, hey, this is my, community, this is my tribe, and people don't really touch your tail, but they don't really it's a cute thing that we do, There's 2 types of tails. There's the one that goes inside of you, and there's another that goes literally on your belt, So he's wearing the belt one, and I'm like, oh, okay, so cool, but also you're coming to a public park with this on.
In a very small town.
Yeah, and I'm like, so in a town that we would have to date in for a long time because he doesn't have a car or a license. So I'm like, I'm thinking this through, and I'm like, you're basically ruining this experience in this town for us for in the future. Again, nothing wrong with wearing a tail or that shirt, just in public it's not the best outside of a pride event or an event for pups, Not everyone signed up for that around. Or if you're going to an event for that, everyone understands, hey, this is what's to be expected, So I'm like, that's my extent to it, I'm like, this is, unless everyone consents to this situation, don't do it, But, so he comes around the corner, and I'm like, are you really, like, wearing that right now in the middle of daylight, 12 o'clock noon? Like, wow, okay, this is different, So he's like, oh, don't you think it's cute? I'm like, I think it's cute, but also, like, not, I'm very hesitant to say that this is okay. And he's like, I'm surprised that you didn't wear anything. And I'm like, no, I'm good, Like, I'm a pup later in private, not now. And so immediately we start walking through the park. And now, keep in mind, we were like joking about the fact that like 2 pups are walking through the park, But, and that's kind of a cute situation, Even when you and I walked through the park for the first time, I'm like, oh my God, he's taking me for a walk. But, so we go through this park and we're going past like, an old couple, we're going past younger people, and I'm like, everything's normal here except for the fact that the guy I'm with is wearing all this gear. But okay, we get around like the corner of the park, and then we're like maybe 5-10 minutes into the date at this point, of actually seeing each other for the first time. First off, he looked nothing like his picture, and all the photos he sent to me were from when he was much younger, and so I'm like, okay, so you lied about a couple things so far, Yeah. And there was nothing wrong with him being like more overweight than the photos were. It's not transparent,
It's dishonest.
Yeah. So we get around the corner and he's like, so here's the thing, can we head back to my apartment? And I'm like, not what I want to do on a first date. And he's like, no, not at all about that. Don't worry about it. I don't want that. I'm just literally had to go to the bathroom. I'm like, you just came from there. Like, and he's like, yeah, but I have to take a number 2. And I'm like, okay, you're being very open about conversation in the first minutes, of a relationship. Like, I'm like, you had 45 minutes plus the 20 minutes that I was late. Like, you could have take your number 2 in that time frame. By the time you're here, you're fine, He's like, I didn't.
And you hadn't been there that long.
No.
So
I'm like, maybe 10 minutes. So it was like, couldn't you have done that? And he's like, sorry, I just, I was running late and I forgot to do that on the way out. I'm like, okay, you were given plenty of notice, but okay, we'll head back there. So we head back to his apartment, and he literally, like, as soon as you go in the apartment, there's a TV on the ground, because it's not on a stand or anything, He has an Xbox on the ground, and he has a couch that smells like crap, All over the floor are boxes full of his clothing, like cardboard boxes filled with clothing. And I'm like, okay, so maybe he just moved in. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. This place smells like crap, but maybe it's not his fault, Sink is filled with dishes and just caked on everything. You
So
can
they've been there a
tell.
while.
Yeah. And like, I didn't see anything past that, but he goes to the bathroom, like 10, 15 minutes later, comes out, and we start like talking again. And I'm like, okay, so we want to head back out and we can go walking again. He's like, no, I just feel more comfortable here. And I'm like, oh, sign number 1 that this is not going well. And I'm like, just promise me you don't want anything more physical today, because we're not doing that. And he's like, yeah, no problem. So we just talk. Well, he takes me on a tour of his house. And literally, he's like, yeah, this is my living room, and this is my kitchen, and it's all in one room, by the way. And then you go down the hall to the right, and there's like a bathroom in the middle of the apartment, and then his bedroom's at the end. But his bedroom's literally like the mattress, but no cover for the mattress. No covers, no pillows, no nothing. It's just on the ground, like a drug dealer kind of like vibe. No furniture at all in the whole apartment, besides the couch that was there when he rented it. And like, I'm just like, this is your bedroom? And he's like, yeah, this is my bedroom. It's all like, it's as nice as I can afford right now. And I'm like, all right, fair enough. Like, I'll go with whatever, Then he's like, well, here's my closet. And he starts pulling out like 3 puppy hoods that are like mistress leather puppy hoods, like $150, $200 a piece. And I'm like, there's a lot of money in just 3 items in this whole apartment when you could have bought like a frame for your mattress or furniture for that kind of price, And literally we're just like talking there for a good while. And then he starts showing me like his kitchen cabinets, like right in front of, you're sitting on a couch here, and right in front of you is like a bunch of clothes down in boxes, just nothing's folded, And so he's like, you want to see my stash? And I'm like, of what, Because that's a weird question,
that could mean a lot of things.
I'm like, of drugs? What are we talking about here, So he's like, okay. So he starts opening his kitchen cabinets. Literally every kitchen cabinet in this whole place. Keep in mind, this is a kitchen cabinet, like, assembly that's on a corner. And so you have, like, 2 whole walls of kitchen cabinets that are just filled with a bunch of, like, adult toys. And puppy gear. And, like...
In his kitchen cabinets.
In his kitchen cabinets. Every toy you can possibly imagine buying on, like, AdamMail.com, literally the whole storefront is here in this apartment, And worst of all, I never told you this. It was like lined up, so like you have an actual like male part kind of things. I don't want to say the actual word, but like
starts with a D.
Yeah. So like they're stacked literally like they're organized, so all the D's are together, all the like male master things are together, it's all like lined up, all like organized, and it's all like vertical. And I'm like, this is so well organized. It's like, it's almost like the perfect kind of playroom, only it's your kitchen, you know?
So he put a lot of effort into organizing that, but nothing else.
There was massive effort into how this was all assembled. And like, even there was like dog D's, what we were talking about.
Oh, God.
Yeah, like, well, they make them for that Adventureland.
Like, are they furry?
No, it's just like they have knots at the end. Anyway, so he has like everything organized into just like human D's and then like puppy D's, you know, on a different shelf. And so they're all organized. And I'm like, I'm just fascinated at this point of like, you spent this much time and money? Like these cabinets, I'm just like personally going through an inventory in my mind of like thinking how much these are worth. Like there's easily a couple $1,000s in those cabinets, you know? And I'm like, to think the money you could have spent on anything, you know, furniture wise to live off of, you know, soap to clean the dishes that are in the sink, anything, you know.
Yeah, there are certain priorities that you need as an adult. I mean,
like, don't get me wrong,
it's
like,
fine to have that stuff, but like,
yeah,
at least make sure that you have a bed.
Yeah, like,
before you start getting that stuff.
I've spent money on that kind of stuff before, and it's like, but I also had furniture first, you know.
Yeah.
And so literally we're sitting there, we're just like talking, and we're getting along fine, but I'm certainly having my concerns at this point. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So about, oh God, this is probably like 3 hours in to the date.
You stuck around for 3 hours?
Oh, much longer than that.
Oh dear.
This was like a 6-hour date. Oh yeah. Oh, it was not good. So
I only got 4.
Well, that's because we both like really got along. We're like, there's definitely gonna be a second time. But this was a long date, and so like like a couple hours in, I'm like, hey, I have to go to the bathroom really bad. Like, just human nature, number one, no problem, you know. So I go to the bathroom, and you should probably know that in the bathtub, the last like 2 inches are just pure black at the bottom of this bathtub.
Ooh.
And I'm just like, okay, so that might be the cause of like the smell in this whole apartment, but it also might just be the apartment, you know? Like that might have been what he bought into this place, you know? Well, it's not. Because he admits later, like, yeah, I'm a little dirty of a person. And I'm like, okay, no shit here, you know? But I go to wash my hands after using the bathroom, and I can't find anything on the sink. Now, what's on the sink is a chain, literally about 2 foot long chain, like heavy steel chain that you buy at like Lowe's or Home Depot, and it's made for like locking a gate or something, like very heavy chain, you know? Now, this is not concerning to me because I know what it's used for, because he explained it. He's like, this is my collar that I use. Now, what you should know about pup play is that there are certain things you use for collars and certain things you don't use for collars. You can get an actual puppy or dog collar for yourself, and that is what you use in this kind of fetish, you know? But this was not that. This was an actual chain, which you're told not to use because your skin oils break down the chain, and actually, like, this is poisoning you, you know? But also, this chain is completely lubed up for some reason. And you can tell it's very oily and very, like, I'm like, you know, why is this on your sink, you know? And there's a bottle of lube on the sink as well. And so I'm like, I don't want to know anything of what happens in this bathroom, you know? And I call out to him, I'm like, hey, where's the soap at? And he's like, oh yeah, I don't own any at all. And I'm like, okay, curiosity at this point strikes me. You work in a grocery store. You have soap in that grocery store because it's like a general grocery store. Couldn't you buy one for like $1 or $2? for when you know a date's coming over that day.
Yeah, that particular store gives you an employee discount, so I mean...
Or, yeah, we know that store.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you could have bought one at any time. Hand soap is a thing. And then I start realizing there's no soap in this entire house. Like, as soon as he says
So no
this...
body wash or anything?
No. I look over to the bathtub, which I noticed the black on the bottom at first, but I didn't look up to see there's no body wash, there's no shampoo, no nothing. This guy doesn't take showers, you know? Okay, so nothing in this whole place. It's not just you don't have hand soap for a guest to come over. It's literally you don't have any soap at all to wash, you know? Okay, this is very, very grossing me out at this point. And so I go back out and I'm like, yeah, so I only like was able to rinse my hands, and he hands me like hand sanitizer. And I'm like, okay, at least you have this, you know? Still, I'm concerned about no soap at all in your shower, but all right, you have hand sanitizer. He's like, to tell you the truth, I'm kind of getting thirsty. How about we go down to grab a soda? And I'm like, I've drove 45 minutes to get here, so that's fair that you would go out and to buy me a soda or whatever, you know? So we go down to literally the grocery store that he works at. And we drive there in my car. And he starts talking to me on the way there. And he's like, hey, by the way, I know I don't have a license yet, but the good news is you do. So I'm like, oh, yeah, like so far, like let's talk about that. And I'm like, I'm kind of concerned that you don't have a license, so would you be willing to get one in the next couple months, you know? And he goes, yeah, let me just have you as a teacher. I'm like, this is a first date, this is a new relationship. I shouldn't be required to teach you how to drive. Do you know any friends or coworkers that can help you, you know? And he's like, not really, I'm not friends with many people, so, okay. But he's like, the good news is I have a parking space outside that comes with the apartment, so you can park there anytime you want, free with it, you know? But when I'm learning how to drive, you can just teach me and I can use your car. And I'm like, again, this is a first date, I'm not comfortable with that. Let's not get into this right now, you know? But let's just say that you're going to have to get your license in a couple months and, you know, maybe work towards a car eventually, rather than spending so much money on toys. You could have bought a car for the amount of toys you have, you know? So, even like a junky one. But, so we go to the grocery store, we get there, and he starts like, not just getting a soda, well, not just a can of soda, but like he starts getting a sandwich. And I'm like, oh, okay, so like we're having lunch. Cool, you know? So I start looking for some stuff, and he's just like, I mean, you can get some stuff if you want, but I mean, you know, you don't have to. And I'm like, so I grab a sandwich for myself, you know? And I'm like, we can just have lunch together in the park or something, you know? We can go back there. And by the way, still wearing the tank top, still wearing the tail. In his grocery store that he works in. Saying hi to all his coworkers. And I'm like, again, there are limitations to how comfortable I would be in public with that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, because, I mean, you've known me. I've worn things around the house, but not, like, out and about.
Yeah.
At my work or whatever, you know? But we get to the checkout counter. Now, keep in mind, he's gotten about $30 of stuff at this point. Like, and I've gotten a sandwich for myself, and I'm like, okay. And including, like, he got a tub of, like, potato salad and stuff. And I'm like, that's stuff that you can't return because you got it from the deli, you know? And so he literally, like, goes to the counter, and he's like, oh, darn it, I forgot my wallet. And I'm like, no, you didn't, because I'm not paying for all this, you know? So I get rid of everything that I was going to buy. Everything, including the drink. And I'm like, you're not going to get all that on my dime. So I put half of it aside. His coworkers are like, you know, do you want to, like, put it on your store credit, you know? Because, like, I can just take it off of your next paycheck. No problem at all. And he's like, no, I'm good. And I'm like, you've literally been offered, like, a handout from one of your coworkers trying to say, hey, this guy came 45 minutes to get here, which she knew about because I was, like, talking with him. And I'm like, she's offered you a lifeline for a first date. She knows we're on a first date, and you're not taking it, you know? Whatever. Okay. So literally, I end up buying a sandwich for him and a drink for him. And I'm like, why did I do this, you know? But we go back to his apartment. You
went back to his apartment?
Well, because he's like, I don't want to go to the park. I don't want to go anywhere else. I feel way more comfortable in my apartment. And I'm like, I guess, fine. We went back there. So then he starts explaining to me how he has never in his life gone on a trip longer than 30 minutes away from where he lives.
Oh my God.
Because he does not feel comfortable going to the bathroom anywhere but his apartment. And I'm like, oh, are we just talking like a number 2 here? He's like, no, a number 1.
And you have to understand, this is a small town, not...
Yeah.
It's like 30 minutes gets you nowhere. Other small towns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like 45 minutes would get you to my town, which was like the largest city for hours away from this place, you know?
And that's still a pretty small town.
Yeah. So I'm like, so what about like a vacation someday or like a trip? Would you ever go on a vacation or a trip somewhere? He goes, no. Point blank, never.
Wow.
I would never go anywhere that's longer than a half an hour away. And I'm like, so my house, which is 45 minutes away, would you ever stay over at my house? Like if I came to pick you up, went back to my house, and you would stay over there or to a party that was coming up, you know? And he's like, no, honestly, 30 minutes is my limit, you know? And I'm like, so we would never be able to do anything ever, you know? And there's no real restaurants in that area, so we can't even go to a restaurant together. I'm like, what do you do around this area for fun? He's like, stay at my apartment and play Xbox. And I'm like, oh, that's it, you know?
Thanks.
Like, that's not a life,
No.
you know? So I'm like very much grossed out at this point, but continue in his apartment to make out.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, did I tell you that part? We
No.
made out for like the next 2 hours. Yeah, I was very desperate. I was very sad about my life at this point, so we made out for a long time. And I remember at the very end of the date, I said to him, like, I probably should get going. He's like, you know, if you want to stay, you can. I'm like, not with that mattress, you know, no pillows, like, you know, no thanks, you know. He's like, well, you're free to stay over next time you come out. I'm like, okay, good to know. And so he, like, as I'm getting up to, like, you know, get my jacket on, because it was cold out that day, he starts laying down on the couch. And I'm like, where are you going with this? Like, I'm not going to, like, do anything to you, you know? And I'm like, so I'm headed down to my car. Would you like to walk me out? You know? And, like...
Giving him a pretty good hint.
Yeah, I even said to him, like, would you like to walk me out? I'm like, this is as... you know me. This is as least subtle as I've ever been in my entire life.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like, this is your one chance to be nice and be a gentleman and do something to save this date, you know? And he's like, no, I'm good, thanks. You know where the car is. I'm like, okay. So I close the door behind me, and then I'm walking down the stairs, like a couple of stairs, and I hear him lock the door behind me. And I'm like, hold on a second. Like, what if I forgot my phone or my keys or something, you know? And secondly, that means you got up from the couch enough to lock the door, so you just didn't want to get up and walk me out, you know?
Yeah.
Even walk me to the door of your apartment, which is like a couple feet away, that you went to anyway to lock it. So, wow, this is like extremely rude at this point, you know? Well, I get to my car, I drive all the way home, and as I'm driving home, I'm like, this is easily the worst experience I've had. And I cannot believe I made out with this guy. I'm like, this is terrible, you know? And, you know, I kind of just want to, like, brush my teeth and, you know, like, get this out of my mind. And I realized in the moment, I'm like, yeah, I'm way too sad to date right now. I need to get happier in my own personal life before I start dating again. And so I took a good time off after this. But anyway, I get home. I'm feeling pretty bad, you know? And so I start a live stream. And at the time, I have this series on the channel called X-Files, talking about exes of mine. And so I literally created an episode live talking about X-Files he was gross. Like talking about this entire date, and I'm like, I cannot believe I went through this. And in the moment, I need support from my community, and they offered support. And then I get a text message from this guy, and he's like, I can't believe you went live and talked about me. I can't believe you said you were having a good time. I'm like, I did not say that, ever, Like, I did not say I was having a good time at all. He's like, I can't believe you would tell other people I didn't have soap. I have. I'm like, where was it then? It wasn't on your sink. It's not your shower. It's not on your kitchen, sink. So where was it, And he's like, well, I don't have it in an apartment right now, but I could have gotten it. And I'm like, so I wasn't completely.
So we didn't have soap.
And he even, said to me, he's like, we could have bought it at the grocery store when we were there.
If you would have paid for it.
So I'm allowed to have soap in your bathroom if I pay for it. What the hell, So that was pretty bad. But I've learned not to be so desperate, and don't be sad enough to take a date with someone. And if you see the signs, the red flags that are red flags, don't go along with it. And if someone shows up and you immediately get that vibe from them, walk away,
There were a number of red flags that Matt could have listened to.
I should have been like, you know what? I'm not having a good time. Have a good day. Goodbye,
Yeah.
But I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'll continue making out with him. I did not get over that day until I took 5 showers. We hope you enjoyed. Share with us in the comments down below whose story you think is worse from all of the stories we've shared. Let us know in the comments if you want us to do another episode on this topic in the future, or what future podcast stories you want us to tell, or future podcast topics you want us to talk about. I really hope to have Michael on at least once a month, twice a month, or something like that, to do these kind of podcast episodes. We would love to continue. Tell us the topic that you want us to cover. And Michael and I have long conversations about a lot of different things, so we would love to share with you our wealth of experience and knowledge, because he's a very smart and brilliant man that I love to share. So definitely. All of a sudden you smile when I say that. You're like, oh, he called me brilliant on the street. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're actually smart. I don't date people that are not smart. So, yeah. Anyway, so let us know. And also let us know in the comments any kind of worst dates that you've had, but don't mention names and stuff like that, because then it gets all weird. And just tell us a story. We'd love to hear your stories in the comments down below. But anything you want to say as we end?
I mean, just remember, don't embarrass anybody.
Yeah.
If the people that we had these dates with, if they were to watch the show, they probably know we're talking about them, but we did not use any names or anything like that. So just be respectful.
Maybe next time Mr. Nutterbutters wants to share how you met Reginald Fluffovers.
Oh, hey, good idea.
Yeah. But yeah, we didn't mention names for a reason. I wouldn't, even in my X-Files series, I wouldn't mention real names. I've used the first letter and changed the name entirely, but that's not good for the world to put out negativity on certain people, because we know we have a platform and we know we have a large audience. So,
and sometimes people change,
yeah, these people could be completely fine now and learned from this experience just like we learned from it, because we have learned a lot from these dates that made our first date perfect. And by the way, I'm just joking. Our first date was fine.
Yeah, it was actually really nice. Oh, and maybe one of these days I'll tell you the story about how I almost got killed in New York.
I was surprised you didn't lead with that story.
Yeah, that because I didn't consider that my worst date. It technically wasn't really a date, so.
But yeah, we'll have to get back to that in the future. So let us know in the comments down below any ideas you have, or if you want this to continue. We would love to hear from your thoughts on this. Comment, subscribe, and share this episode with others. And have a great day, everyone. And we hope you like the new podcast format a little bit on the show. We won't be doing it every week, but we will be doing it a little bit, I hope. So, anything else?
Bye for now.